Hi, and welcome back to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. On this channel, we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy, and I'm helping people to learn how to use ACT. So whether you're a therapist utilizing ACT with your clients in your therapy room, or you're a graduate student, maybe thinking about using ACT as your go-to therapeutic modality, or if you're a client that's been exposed to acceptance and commitment therapy and you're wanting to learn how to utilize that for your own mental health, this channel is for you. Now, if you've been following along, I've been in this ACT roadmap series, and I've been going through a 10-session protocol on how to use ACT in a session, whether you're a therapist or if you're a client. Now, we're going to be doing session 5 today, and I'm going to be introducing and going through the ACT matrix. So if you've been following along, we're in 3 phases here. So we have phase 1, which is the open phase, and that's where we're teaching acceptance strategies and letting go of the struggle. And then we also teach and introduce cognitive diffusion, how to unhook and open up to your experiences instead of experiential avoidance. In phase 2, we discuss the processes to help clients to become aware. So we use contact with the present moment and mindfulness strategies, and starting to work on training our attention and being able to move that around. And then we also introduce the process of self as contacts, or the observing self, the one who knows that they know. And all those are really, really helpful. And so you can use this session after you go through those first 4 and those first 2 phases as you segue into phase 3, which is the engage phase, where we'll talk about values and committed action. However, I have found that the ACT matrix is pretty flexible. So you can actually use this. And I know some clinicians and trainers teach that you can use this during the assessment part. I don't know if I use it that early, but I think in session 1, for some clients, this may be where they're at. I think it really depends on their previous maybe skills, like maybe they already have tried some mindfulness and they kind of are already aware of what thoughts and feelings, and maybe they just need something to help put it all together. So you can kind of use this to go through the 10 sessions chronologically, or kind of use it where you want to. All right, I love this diagram. It's kind of a napkin diagram that I explain to clients, and it's something that is really sticky. Helps them to remember that like a lot of the different concepts that we go over in one simple diagram that they can write on a napkin and potentially share with their spouse or someone else. So I really like it. Before I get to the ACT matrix, there's a couple things that we're trying to accomplish in this session. So by the end of the session, you should be able to see your patterns more clearly, especially the difference between moves that maybe pull you toward the life that you want and what matters, and moves that take you away from your discomfort, but also the things that are really important to you. So we really want to help clients to transition from asking the question, how do I stop this feeling, to how do I want to live even when this shows up? And so this is a really good diagram to help them see their choice. Now for therapists, there's a couple things that we're trying to kind of work through here. First, we want to help clients to discriminate choices that they make behaviorally. We want them to discriminate, is that a toward move or is that an away move? And it's not in a judgmental sense. We just want them to be able to utilize that language to help them kind of see the long-term consequences of engaging in that action. Is it going to move you toward that life that you want, or is it going to move you away? We also want to start to help them understand the metric of workability. Is this workable? And if so, is it workable in the short term, or is it workable in the long run? And this is where we start to analyze the behavior and the choices that they make. because ultimately we want something that works and works over the long run. This is also a great session to start to plot down values. And so this is a good, maybe initial values assessment, and begin to kind of clarify things that are important to a client. And then kind of that final thing that therapists are wanting to help a client with is to get that behavior awareness, and we want them to be grounded in the present moment. So the way that I kind of introduce this is that this is any given situation that you're in. You can put this ACT matrix down and kind of see how all these parts are moving together. All right, so that's kind of a long introduction. So let's go ahead and get into the ACT matrix. So if you download the ACT roadmap, you will see in session 5 that there's a diagram there with a few questions in each quadrant, and kind of has it all laid out. And so feel free to use that to help you to follow along. So I'm going to be using the whiteboard today, and I think the next session I'll use it as well. And so I like to use the whiteboard, but you're welcome to use like a piece of paper, or if you have one of those small whiteboards. I do think that you need to write it down. I'd rather do that than print it out, because they're going to see that and they're not going to see how it all connects. So you got to do it piece by piece. So for this, you want to set it up and ask a client about what situation or issue do they want to utilize for this. So sometimes when you do the initial assessment, maybe you're working on a specific issue. So let's say it's anxiety and maybe panic attacks that they've had, and maybe that's what they want to work on. But if they have like several things that maybe their life is just feeling really stressful and chaotic, we want to narrow it down and pick one thing that they want to use for this specific diagram. All right. So let's pick anxiety and panic for our example here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the whiteboard. Hopefully you can see and follow along. So the way we're going to start here is we're going to write down a horizontal line. Now this line represents your behavior. It represents what we can see. So if I were a fly on the wall that maybe I could, see what's going on here, I would be able to observe all the things that you're doing behaviorally. This line has two directions. So one is going toward the life that we want, and one is going away. So let's say you are right here. All right, you're trying to go toward the life that you want. Now, context is everything. And so depending on the situation, you're going to make a choice behaviorally to go toward a life that you want or away from the life that you want. Now, there's some context where it makes a lot of sense to go toward that life that you want. Let's say in most areas, you don't have that anxiety show up. You don't have the panic show up. Like putting on your pants today, or brushing your teeth, or eating breakfast. There's many instances where you don't have that show up, but there are specific situations where it does. And in those terms, you tend to do something behaviorally that takes you either toward or away from the life you want. There are situations where it is necessary. The context says, hey, I need to get away from this. So let's say, I'm not the best drawer here, but let's say you and I are walking along a path. And in the grass, we start to see in our peripherals that something's moving, and it's moving pretty quick toward us. Before we even know what it is, we move away from it. And it turns out it's a snake. Now, I'm not a snake handler. I don't like snakes. I don't have much experience with snakes. And maybe you are, and that wouldn't bother you. But in most cases, we would want to move away. Now, is that wrong? I would say it's workable. It's something that works in that specific context. It moves us away. Maybe we're not going toward that life that we want. We're not able to continue on together at that moment. So we have to make a choice. And so with this, we're looking at what works. All right. And we're going to look at what works in that context, in that situation. And I want you to kind of keep in mind there's things that work in the short term. Maybe it decreases our discomfort, but maybe it's at the expense of something we really value, that we want to go toward. So while it works, it's not workable in the long run. Hopefully that kind of connects. So when it comes to fear, when things where you really should be uh, like concerned about safety, making an away move is the right move. May not move you towards the life that you want, but that's what makes sense. So this is one line, and I'm actually we'll erase our guide for now. There is a second line, and it also has two directions. And this represents our outer life and our inner life. Now, what is our outer life? Well, if you picture this like water, like if you were in a pool and you were swimming, this would be everything that's above the water, and this would be everything below the water. Everything above is still something that fly can see, right? But the things that are underneath the water, that's something we can't visibly see or another person can't see. So the outer life would be like your sensations. I would even put like your five senses in there. It would be what your body reacts to. That would also be some of those. And again, if I were a fly on the wall, I could tell if you are afraid. You're starting to shiver. Maybe your leg is bouncing. I can tell you're a little fidgety, or maybe you got some anxiety there. Goosebumps. I could see that your goosebumps are here. Those would be all examples of this outer life. The inner life, now that is going to be our content. So that's our thoughts, our feelings. This would also be like memories, urges, images that we have. This is all going on beneath the surface. These are not things that I could see in you. All right. So you have these kind of two directions that we go. Now, we have something here in the middle, or somewhat. Now, I want you to take a guess on who that someone is that can both see behaviorally what you're doing and also can see the sensations and the outer light, but also knows all the things that are going on inside. Who would that person be? Who would that observer be? That's right. It's me. There is a perspective, this observing self that's in the middle here. And this is going to be important to acknowledging all the parts that are going on. All right, so we're going to come back to this in a moment, but I want you to see how this is broken down. There are now 4 boxes or 4 quadrants, and we're going to go through this using anxiety and panic. So the first one is values. Now, values, what would be some of the things that you want to, that you feel are important in how you want to live in this world? How you want others to feel about you? What you want your life to be about? Now, we would kind of want to take some examples here that you've already given and put these on here. So you've already mentioned a few things like your relationships is really important. All right. You said faith. Yeah. Your relationship with God is important. You also mentioned that being genuine is important, that you want to be yourself. Or what would be some other things that you would, or maybe people that are really important to you? Okay. So health. All right. All right. The education, maybe school. So we want to get about 5 to 7 here when it comes to values. So what would be some other things that might come to mind? Oh, okay. Children. So put them on here, or family. I can't spell there. Okay. Uh, Anything else? Work. Got it. All right. So maybe all of these you could dig in and maybe there'd be some more clarification that we can do on these values. But for now, we'll use these 7 values as kind of the important areas of life that you want to go toward. All right. So over here we have thoughts and feelings, but these would be categorized as unhelpful. These are problematic thoughts and feelings that you have. These are things that, if you were to divide this, they are moving you away from these values, these important areas that you've identified. So, what would be some of those thoughts and feelings that tend to show up when we're thinking about anxiety and we're thinking about panic, maybe having a panic attack? All right. So, in this part, we want to put the obvious here. So we're talking about the feeling, experience of anxiety, and we're also talking about panic, kind of the claustrophobic, the walls are closing in, of, oh my gosh, am I going to die? It's a lot of these experiences here. So maybe there's some thoughts that are pretty common, such as, what if? What if I fail? Uh, what if I don't know enough? What if, a disaster happens? What if the worst happens? All right. Maybe worst case scenario. That might be another thing that pops in your mind. Some thoughts of, um, I might, I might, I might have a panic attack. All right. So we want to really get as close to how a client may describe their thought life. So I might ask, well, what's it sound like to you in your mind? Like, how do you talk to yourself? What are some of the things that come up that are not helpful? All right. So they're going to give you some other things to put in here. Might put fear, doubt might be another kind of feeling that they put in. There's a whole lot of things, and we want to make sure that we kind of fill up this quadrant. The next quadrant that we'll work on is behaviors. Now, specifically, these are behaviors that are moving you away from this life that you want. Now, when it comes to anxiety and panic, other people might not know what's going on, right? So they're kind of like this fly on the wall that I wrote earlier, and they're kind of wondering, well, what's going on? So what behaviorally does that look like to move away from the life that you want? So when these things show up, what do you do? All right, well, a big one is I isolate. Maybe I don't want to be around other people. I don't want them to see me. Or maybe I get quiet. Maybe that's a subtlety, but people notice that you're not as bubbly and outgoing. Maybe for some, they might say substance use. Maybe they use more of the nicotine or marijuana or alcohol or some sort of medication. So they might say behaviorally, they might go towards that. And procrastinate. Oh yeah, that's a big one. Especially if you're in school. Procrastinate. I can't even procrastinate. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so you're not working on it in school. So they may or may not have a lot of ideas come to mind. So if you're struggling with this, tie it into the values. So, well, what does that look like for relationships? Well, yeah, I isolate, I get quiet, or I shut down. Okay, I'll write that up here. What's that do for your faith? Well, I kind of feel disconnected. All right, what's that look like? Disconnect from church, maybe? Okay. Genuine. Well, it's really not like me to get quiet. I'm kind of the life of the party. That's my personality. So it doesn't feel like me. I can't really be myself. Or when I'm experiencing panic, like I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want them to worry about me. Health, well, um, honestly, you might be tempted to go to the ER, or maybe you call 911, or you feel like it's an emergency, or maybe you, um, contact family. Again, if it's a safety issue, that may make sense in that context. So I don't want to confuse the two. But for them, they go to the emergency room when they're feeling that panic instead of maybe an alternative behavior that might move them toward these. All right. So I don't know what all will show up, but we want to make sure that we start to fill these in. Now, what we do is we tie in these experiences down here. So if you're thinking of these what if worst case scenarios, you mentioned that you start to shut down, you start to isolate, you start to get quiet when those things happen. You mentioned when you have this anxiety that you start to procrastinate. Uh, and this panic really seems to also lead you to the emergency room, or you start to take those actions of you think you might die. All right. So we see all this, but I also want you to know every time that you act in this way and you move away, you're also feeding all of this internal thoughts and feelings that are unhelpful. It reinforces, you start to get this kind of cycle that moves you further and further away over the long term. I don't know if you see that, but that's what we start to see behaviorally and what others are able to notice. All right. So we got these 3 areas filled in and we start to go over here. And for this one, what I like to do, we'll call it committed action. What I like to do is I like to actually stand in front of this half so that, they could start to think a little bit fresher, because they might get actually hooked and start to feel like they're in their feelings of anxiety and panic. So we want to help them out by blocking out this half and start to think fresh and in new ways. So I wrote down committed action here, and these are going to be behaviors that if I were a fly on the wall, I'd be able to see. So what are you doing when you have these things show up? What are the things that you want to do to act toward these values? So for relationships, what does it look like to take a committed action toward that? Oh, well, this would mean maybe sending a text or making a call. All right. Being present. So that means being there. Okay. So not isolating, but actually being at the event or around the people, even though you might have that panic. All right. This would actually be like maybe telling someone. That might be something you fear, but that might also help them and help you to feel more yourself. All right. For school. All right. Maybe getting help. All right. Therapy. Okay. What else? Oh, journal. Sure. So you'll start to put some things. These will be, things that a client will help tailor. So you don't just put committed actions on here. And what you'll then do is kind of back up and say, so we've written down some committed actions here, and you still have all this stuff show up in a given situation. So you're noticing all this stuff. This me is noticing, man, I got a lot of anxiety about this, or I'm having that panic stuff start to trickle in. All right. But I have this committed action. And what happens is you start to have these what if worst case scenarios show up. And instead of going to the unhelpful behavior, you start to say, all right, I'm gonna tell someone, or maybe I'm gonna journal. That might be another one. So you start to have these things that put you in a different direction. What also happens is behaviorally, every time you act in one of these ways, it's bidirectional. So it actually helps to, I don't know about correct, but it helps to transform these kind of thoughts and feelings. So instead of these what if worst case scenarios catastrophizing everything, you actually have this what if worst case scenario, and then you talk to somebody and they reassure you. They help you think through it. They help you see the facts and the evidence on both sides of things, and you get a more complete picture. So this is what happens when we start to move towards the life that we want. It's also going to bring you in contact with your values. You're going to have some positive emotions while also potentially having some of those painful emotions too. So this is kind of the whole picture here. Now I know it looks messy, but this is something that can be really sticky and help a client to kind of map out what they're experiencing. Now we just took anxiety and panic here, but you could actually reuse this. This could be something where you could use it for another area of life that they want to work on. And in later sessions, this is really helpful to come back to. Now, at the end of this session, we really want to highlight the language of moving toward or away. And after this, they're going to be able to really identify their behaviors in the moment as either an away move or toward move. So hopefully you were able to kind of grasp this and learn something here and how to use this with clients, or if you're a client, and how to help yourself with your mental health struggles. So, all right, in the next video, we're going to continue our sessions here in our protocol. We're going to talk about willingness, and I'm going to use begin to kind of use a metaphor called the passengers on the bus to help take action toward take committed action toward this life that we want. Remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.